is come dine with me before Kate panics. It's not an invitation for you to join us for Sunday lunch. Come dine with me. I was also reflecting over the week on our first 13 years of faith when we lived in Upper Beeding, or near Upper Beeding. That was our Baptist church we went to for about 13 years. We both came to faith there, and we loved the church there. And part of the culture of that church that I see more clearly now that I've left is that people really, really eat together a lot. We had, over those years, so many invitations to go to people's houses, or to go to a restaurant, go to the pub, go for a picnic. And we would also have them back to our house for meals, barbecues, whatever, maybe around for coffee and cake. And rarely would a week go by where you weren't going to somebody's house, they weren't coming to yours, and a whole variety of people as well. Sometimes, if I'm honest, it became a bit of a pressure. You got into that, we've been invited there, we better invite them back. But on the whole, it was really healthy and really good. About 11 years ago, when I was in my last year at Bible college, you start to go to churches to preach with what's called a peep. You preach with a peep, so people in the church don't know why you're coming, unless word is leaked out, which it often does. And you're going there when there is a vacancy for a minister at that church, and you preach, and you get a feel for the church, and they get a feel for you. When Kate and I were doing that 11 years ago, we were wondering, I wonder who's going to have us round for dinner, for lunch. I wonder who we'll be invited to. We came, and there was no invitation still. We wondered if somebody would catch us after the service, and there'd be the allotted people to invite us round. And we went home. As things progressed, a few months later, and we came officially, and it was for the Preach with a View. This is when the church were getting more serious about us, and we were getting more serious, but to still wait and see if it was the right thing. And again, we were waiting and seeing, thinking, well, surely then we will be invited for lunch, because that's what churches do. And a little bit a bit uncomfortable, one of those situations, but at least we'll get to know people better. I don't think our children would have been too thrilled at the idea. But there we go, we waited throughout the week before, and the invitation didn't come. We came here, and we went back home again. By the way, this isn't to make anybody feel good. This is 11 years ago. We're almost over it. Then when we were called to the church, and with the culture of Upper Beeding Baptist Church in mind, we thought, it won't take long until we get into the swing of being invited people back, and it was a little bit daunting again, thinking, that can take over life. But also exciting, knowing that around the table you get to know people really, really well. Well, about a month went by, then 2. Kate, maybe they don't do it here. Or maybe they do it, but without us. And I'm sure people were having meals together. I'm sure we were. But actually what we notice is just how much at Upper Beeding there had been a culture of eating together, any excuse to eat together. We see that in the reading this morning, in the book of Acts, and this is a picture of the early church. The Holy Spirit has come at Pentecost, and Jesus had ascended to the right hand of the Father. The church is starting to grow. And what we get a glimpse of is that many of the church, they would meet at the temple for witnessing, for teaching, and then they would gather at their homes for fellowship and for a taste of communion. Communion would develop over the years ahead for the taste of communion. But even the communion would be based around eating together, having a big meal together. And it was something that the church did regularly. Later on, many years later, communion got separated from actually having a meal together. But in the beginning, it was very much all based around food. The church got to meet and eat together and get to know each other better and welcome new people, so they got to know them. It was wonderful. It wasn't problem-free. Never look at the book of Acts and say, that's how church should be today. It's not a blueprint. It's a taste of how church was, and we can learn something from it. But there were problems. We learned from Paul in Corinthians that sometimes when house churches got together, the richer people would have more food. They would scoff their food, and the poorer people would be left feeling a little bit aggrieved. So, no perfection there. But the truth is, the church built over the years, you could say, over food, over the table. And of course we see in the ministry of Jesus that eating was a key part of his ministry. Some commentators have said that he eats his way through the Gospels. In particular, if you look at the book of Acts, the Gospel of Luke, we see Jesus either, in many places, going to a meal, eating a meal, or on his way back from a meal. Think about some of the stories that come to mind. The feeding of the 5,000. Think of the Last Supper, that intimacy over the meal. Think of the stories about him meeting with the religious folk, the Pharisees, going into their homes and eating with them. Think about the stories of him going to those who were seen as outcasts, going to the home of Zacchaeus, going to the home of other tax collectors and eating with them. Jesus got a reputation. You know what they called him? A glutton and a drunkard. And they compared him to John the Baptist and John the Baptist's disciples, who are more into fasting and eating very little. But there was something about Jesus, and when asked about why his disciples ate, he talked about this bridegroom being with them, the celebration, the importance of eating together. Some people say Jesus was killed because of who he ate with. I love the fact that when people draw a line, when religious people draw a line and they say, these are the in people, usually themselves, and these are the out people, the outcasts. Jesus, more often than not, would go to the other side of the line and eat and meet with the outcasts. Why does he meet and eat with tax collectors and sinners? Because he reflects the heart of God, and by his grace he also ate with the Pharisees as well. Eating, meeting, getting to know people was key for Jesus. And I actually think there is a taste in the Bible when we see Jesus after the resurrection, after he's died, when Jesus is resurrected, and points are being made when he eats, that no, I'm not just a spirit, that the resurrection for all of you will be physical. And a glimpse, I believe, of the fact that we will be eating for eternity. Yay! Eating and drinking together for eternity. And for sure, Jesus also has these pictures he talks about the kingdom coming in its fullness, and there being a wonderful banquet that we will eat together. Wonderful pictures. I've had many a glimpse of the food culture in Israel. When I first went to Israel when I was 18, on a kibbutz, every morning, every lunchtime, every evening, the whole community comes together to eat. And sometimes it was a pain, sometimes it was awkward because you had to talk or listen, but you really got to know each other so well. When I was hitchhiking around the country, the first person who stopped, the first thing he did was stop and make coffee. Then he took us to his flat in Tel Aviv. The first thing he did was make this wonderful food together. When I had the adventure a couple of times of walking out into the deserts and meeting Bedouin tribes, the first thing they did when you got to the tent was invite you in for tea and something to eat. When Ant and I went to Israel 5 years ago to meet the Arabic Christians, wow! Food. Baklava, coffee, falafel, everywhere you go, food. And it was a reflection of their culture that they meet and eat together. So why is eating and meeting together over the table so important. Some say it's a place where strangers become friends. Some describe it as a place of connection. I think it's a place where we have the opportunity in a busy life to slow down. And we have the excuse of food to do that. We have to slow down. We don't have to. But there's an opportunity to slow down, to eat together. I think also if you stick people in a room and say talk to each other, it can be a little bit awkward, can't it? But I think eating together can give us the excuse. It takes the pressure off. We're there to eat. And then natural conversation overflows whilst we eat together. Slow down in a busy society. Listen with thanksgiving for the food, even if not spoken in prayer. Even if we don't say a prayer every time we have a meal, it's coming together with that thanksgiving for the food, celebrating together. Meal times are so important. In the Parker household over the years, and we are not the Waltons, for those of you who remember the Waltons. We have had many an argument over the dinner table as well. But something we have tried to do is meet and have dinner and lunch together on many occasions when the girls were growing up. I think Katie and I then started getting lazy, or we were doing something different, and we started eating in front of the television a bit more, and Kate would remind us of the importance, but it was lovely when the girls started saying, can we eat around the table again? Something had gone in about the importance of eating around the table. And even now when we do eat in front of the television, it is so frustrating. You're trying to listen and the conversations start. So I pause. And we start again, and then the conversations start. And then I get the message, I'm slow sometimes, I get the message, actually, isn't this lovely that we all want to talk together? So eating and meeting is precious, and some of our most precious memories. And I think our daughters, our children, have felt more relaxed to be able to talk because there's an excuse to talk rather than sitting back, how was your day then? So real benefits. Worthing Baptist Church. What's the difference between a culture of eating together and organising eating together? For sure we do some organised things. We had our hog roast a few months ago. We suggest meeting on the beach with a picnic, and that happened a couple of times. We have our mince pies and mulled wine at Christmas. And we do various things, which is wonderful. But that's not what I'm talking about. Organised things are great, but it does take people to organise them. And often in churches you get the same people getting tired because they are the ones doing it. Great to do sometimes. But can I invite you to think about a culture of eating together? Of people within the church inviting other people to come for a meal, or invite yourself for a meal to somebody else's. But it doesn't have to be grand. Don't think that we have to then get into outdoing each other with food. It needs to be very special. And let's not, when we do have a meal together, lose focus, because the relationship is the key thing. I remember years ago going to a relative's house, and they were so stressed out about the food and the quantity that we'd never seen them. They were always in the kitchen. They missed it. I wanted to see them. But they were so focused on the food, so we could go too far with that. But be creative, my suggestion. Many of you are already. But meet for coffee and cake, either at your house or go out for coffee and cake. It was really funny when I first came here. And I would say to people, let's meet for coffee sometime. And I thought that was really normal. And I wasn't dressing up. Let's have a pastoral meeting. I would come to you and for a pastoral visit. My phrase was, let's come for a coffee. And I got word back that it made people really anxious because some people said, why does he want coffee? I don't like coffee. Is tea okay? Meeting together over a coffee or tea or an orange juice or nothing, but coming together to meet together. And Peter and I are always up to coming for a coffee or a tea. In fact, we do with many of you, or we go out to a coffee shop. So doing that, doing what you can, not what you can't. Your eating together might be that bag of popcorn at the cinema. That eating together might be going for a stroll along the beach with an ice cream, or in your buggy along the beach with an ice cream. So doing what you can, but not what you can't. Some suggestions for our church culture. And it's happening already, but let's dig deep into it and do it more and more if you want to. So with people already who make up this church, in Advent, or before, or in the New Year, well, why not invite somebody for a meal, or out for a coffee, or to the cinema? And think about Jesus, because sometimes we're good at doing that with people we know, people we always have a meal with. But his table got bigger and bigger and bigger, you could say. There is room at the table for everybody. You're not going to be best friends with everybody in this church. But hey, why not give it a go of getting to know somebody better? Because it is a beautiful way of hearing their story, having a laugh, celebrating. Why not take the risk? It's not risk-free. We saw in the early church sometimes it went wrong. But hey, we can learn and grow together. And when there's somebody new to the church, why not invite them out for a coffee or to the cinema or whatever, and eat and meet together? Some people feel very, you know this as well as I do, very uncomfortable over food. Some people have a phobia of eating in front of other people. So again, do what you can, not what you can't. If that is you, then do something that you feel comfortable. You might feel comfortable going out for popcorn or a lolly or whatever, or sitting with them as they eat. Do what you can, not what you can't. Within families, if you're part of a family, can I encourage you, as I encourage myself, to eat together. And sometimes to turn off the television and chat together. And the key distractor, if we think that eating together is being together and not rushing away, let's turn off our mobile phones. Let's turn off our mobile phones, because they take you somewhere else. They defeat the object of being together. And it's all generations. It's so easy to look at the young people and say, oh, it's on their phones. Well, I notice it in all generations. And I notice it in my hand as well. If you have a partner, husband, wife, or a partner, can I encourage you? Part of our marriage preparation course is don't forget date nights. For the next however many years, continue to have a meal together. And especially if you have children, it is fantastic and healthy for the whole family if you get the opportunity to meet together, just the two of you, over a meal. I know some couples find that really hard when they have got used to being with the children all the time, and they go out for a meal and they think, what do we talk about? Conversation dries up. But can I encourage you to invest in that in a relationship? And with your friends, with friends, do something different. Maybe treat them. Maybe split the bill. Maybe get them to treat you. Whatever it is, let's be experimental. With work colleagues. With neighbours. How about eating with them more? I think many offices, from what I understand, these days, people used to go to a canteen often, but many people sit in front of the computer working and eating their sandwich. What about that culture at work? And what about that neighbour? Invite them round for a barbecue, invite them round for a cuppa, invite them round for a biscuit. And don't fall into this trap, I would humbly suggest, that I used to fall into and I was taught. Get the work colleague round, get the neighbour round, and if they're not a Christian, steer the conversation round to Christianity. This is lovely food, lovely bread. Yes, they used to eat in the Bible. It is so naff. It is so naff. I and Kate and I were on the receiving end of that many times. We became Christians in spite of that, not because of that. Just get together to get to know people and to love them. And hey, eventually, if they ask you questions, hopefully it's obvious because you're such a lovely person. There's something so different about you that it will stand out. But then there's an opportunity. But it's relational rather than imposing. Make the table wider and wider and wider. When we see homeless people, personally I never give money, but I will sometimes buy food. But it's not a dump and run. One of the things when you speak to them that they most appreciate, I talk about them, anybody, but they appreciate is actually stopping to talk and to listen. And not impose the gospel, by the way, again, but to talk and to listen, and they feel valued. And even take them to a fast food restaurant, or whatever. Let's be creative in all of this. Now, Peter and I do not want to be sued at the end of Advent because you have all put on pounds and pounds and pounds. I don't mean eat more, I mean eat and meet more. So changing our habits. And if you do end up eating more because of this wonderful new thing that you're doing or doing more and more, think about people who fly and sometimes offset carbon emissions by paying for a tree. That's wonderful. But maybe if you do end up eating more, maybe compensate by doing a bit more exercise. In Timothy, it says that moderate amount of exercise is good for you. And again, with that in mind, it's doing what we can, not what we can't. I love hearing about my mother-in-law's sitting in a chair, exercise thing. Wonderful. And if food, as a side note, if food is really an issue for you and awkward, then the same principles of eating together can be gained from walking together or going out on buggies together. Because that's the focus. Some of our best conversations, actually in our marriage and also with our children, it's when we're doing something because it feels less kind of, let's talk. So how about over Advent? I pose the question, who can you invite? As well as the normals, the usuals, who can you invite to eat together? It sounds so simple. When I was preparing this sermon today, I was thinking, this is such a basic thing. Not very exciting. But I think it is so key if we take the lesson from the early church and we take the lesson from Jesus himself. Many churches, many ministers are searching out there for the perfect discipleship program. You hear it, it's part of the talk that always goes on. I think our whole life program is fantastic, and I think the fact that a lot of that is based around eating together and going out together at Christmas and the like for meals. Fantastic. Why not broaden that as well? Invite another whole life group to you for a meal. Go out, take them on at the Skittles at the pub in Finton. 2 whole life groups, battling it out on the Skittles and eating as well. So basic, but I think doing things will win anyway. I think things like this are so key and simple. Eating and meeting together.